Let's Narrate, based on the books by Roald Dahl, adapted for audio by Sam, aka Red Tie Gobble. Episode 3, Fantastic Mr. Fox, featuring guest voicer Sage, aka Orphan Ways.
Oh, what a mighty few days this has been for my family, and all of our friends as well. First, our lives are endangered by three of the most stupidest and, quite frankly, most repulsive men on this planet. We all could have died in an instant, but my marvelous husband came up with a plan that was so dangerous and crazy, it just had to work. Woo-hoo! My husband is quite the fellow, and quite nice tails as well. Sorry, I'm just a teeny bit drunk. So I'll let the narrator take over to tell you the tale about my man, Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Down in the valley, there were 3 farms. The owner of these farms had done well. They were rich men. They were also nasty men. All 3 of them were about as nasty as mean as any men you could meet. Their names were Farmer Bogus, Farmer Bunce, and Farmer Bean. Bogus was a chicken farmer. He kept thousands of chickens. He was enormously fat. This was because he ate 3 boiled chickens smothered with dumplings every day for breakfast, lunch and supper. Bunce was a duck and goose farmer. He kept thousands of ducks and geese. He was a kind of pot-bellied dwarf. He was so short his chin would have been underwater in the shallow end of any swimming pool in the world. His food was donuts and goose livers. He mashed the livers into a disgusting paste, and then stuffed the paste into donuts. This diet gave him a tummy ache and a beastly temper. Bean was a turkey and apple farmer. He kept thousands of turkeys in an orchard full of apple trees. He never ate any food at all. Instead, he drank gallons of strong cider which he made from the apples in his orchard. He was as thin as a pencil and the cleverest of them all. Bogus and Bunce and Bean, one fat, one short, one lean. These horrible crooks, so different in looks, are nonetheless equally mean. That is what the children around about used to sing when they saw them. On a hill above the valley there was a wood. In the wood there was a huge tree. Under the tree there was a hole. In the hole lived Mr. Fox and Mrs. Fox and their 4 small foxes. Every evening as soon as it got dark, Mr. Fox would say to Mrs. Fox, "Well, my darling, what shall it be this time? A plump chicken from Bogus, a duck or a goose from Bunce, or a nice turkey from Bean?" And when Mrs. Fox had told him what she wanted, Mr. Fox would creep down into the valley into the darkness of the night and help himself. Bogus and Bunce and Bean knew very well what was going on, and it made them wild with rage. They were not men who liked to give anything away, lest did they like anything to be stolen from them. So every night each of them would take his shotgun and hide in a dark place somewhere on his own farm, hoping to catch the robber. But Mr. Fox was too clever for them. He always approached the farm with the wind blowing in his face, and this meant that if any man were lurking in the shadows ahead, the wind would carry the smell of that man to Mr. Fox's nose far away. Thus, if Mr. Bogus was hiding behind his chicken house number 1, Mr. Fox would smell him out from 50 yards off and quickly change direction, heading for chicken house number 4 at the other end of the farm. "Dang and blast that lousy beast!" cried Bogus. "I'd like to rip his guts out," said Bunce. "He must be killed," cried Bean. "But how?" cried Bogus. "How on earth can we catch the blighter?" Bean picked his nose delectably with a long finger. "I have a plan," he said. "You've never had a decent plan yet," said Bunce. "Shut up and listen," said Bean. "Tomorrow night we'll all hide just outside the house where the fox lives. We'll all wait there until it comes out, then bang! Bang, bang, bang." "Very clever," said Bunce, "but first we have to find the hole." "My dear Bunce, I've already found it," said the crafty Bean. "It's up on the wood in the hill. It's under a huge tree." "Well, my darling," said Mr. Fox, "what should it be tonight?"
I think we'll have duck tonight.
said Mrs. Fox.
Yes, bring us 2 fat ducks if you please. One for you and me, and one for the children.
Ducks it shall be, said Mr. Fox. Bunce is best.
Now do be careful.
Oh, my darling, said Mr. Fox. I can smell those goons a mile away. I can even smell one or the other. Bogus gives off a filthy stink of rotten chicken skins. Bunce reeks of goose livers, and as for Bean, the fumes of apple cider hang about him like poisonous gases.
Yes, but just don't get careless. You know they'll be waiting for you, all three of them.
Don't you worry about me, said Mr. Fox. I'll see you later. But Mr. Fox would have not been quite so cocky had he known exactly where the three farmers were waiting at that moment. They were just outside the entrance to the hole, each one cocking behind a tree with his gun loaded. And what is more, they had chosen their positions very carefully, making sure that the wind was not blowing from them towards the fox's hole. In fact, it was blowing in the opposite direction. There was no chance of them being smelled out. Mr. Fox crept out the dark tunnel to the mouth of his hole. He poked his long, handsome face out into the night air and sniffed once. He moved an inch or two forward and stopped. He sniffed again. He was always especially careful when coming out of his hole. He inched forward a little more. The front half of his body was now in the open. His black nose twitched from side to side, sniffing and sniffing for the sense of danger. He found none. He was just about to go trotting forward into the wood when he heard, or thought, he heard a tiny noise, a soft rustling sound, as though someone had moved a foot ever so gently through a patch of dry leaves. Mr. Fox flattened his body against the ground and lay very still, his ears pricked. He waited a long time, but he heard nothing more. It must have been a field mouse, he told himself, or some other small animal. He crept a little further up the hill, then further still. He was almost right out in the open now. He took a last careful look round. The wood was murky and very still. Somewhere in the sky, the moon was shining. Just then, his sharp night eyes caught a glint of something bright behind a tree not far away. It was a small silver speck of moonlight shining from a polished surface. Mr. Fox lay still, watching it. What on earth was it? Now it was moving. It was coming up and up. Great heavens! It's a barrel of a gun! Quick as a whip, Mr. Fox jumped back into his hole, and at that same instant, the entire wood seemed to explode around him. The smoke from the three guns floated upward into the night air. Bogus and Bunce and Bean came out from behind their trees and walked towards the hole. "Should we get him?" said Bean. One of them shone a flashlight on the hole, and there on the ground, in the circle of light, half in and half out of the hole, lay the poor, tattered, blood-stained remains of a fox's tail. Bean picked it up. "We've got the tail of Mr. Fox," he said, tossing the thing away. "Dang and blast," said Bogus. "We shot too late. We should have let the fly the moment he poked his head out." "He won't be poking it out again in a hurry," Bunce said. Bean pulled a flask from his pocket and took a swig of cider. He then said, "It'll take 3 days at least before it gets hungry enough to come out again. I'm not sitting around here waiting for that. Let's dig him out." "Oh," said Bogus, "now you're talking sense. We can dig him out in a couple of hours. We'll know he's there." "I reckon there's a whole family of them down that hole," Bunce said. "Then we'll have the lot," said Bean. "Get the shovels." Down the hole, Mrs. Fox was tenderly licking the stump on Mr. Fox's tail to stop the bleeding.
It was the finest tail for miles around,
she said between licks. "It hurts," said Mr. Fox.
"I know it does, sweetheart, but it'll get better soon."
"And it'll grow soon again, Dad," said one of the small foxes. "It'll never grow again," said Mr. Fox. "I shall be tailless for the rest of my life." He looked very glum. There was no food for the foxes that night, and soon the children dozed off. Then Mrs. Fox dozed off, but Mr. Fox couldn't sleep because of the pain in the stump of his tail. "Well," he thought, "I suppose I'm lucky to be alive at all, and now they found our hole, we're going to have to move out as soon as possible. We'll never get any peace if we—" What was that? He turned his head sharply and listened. The noise he heard now was the most frightening noise a fox can ever hear. The scraping of shovels digging into the soil. "Wake up!" he cried. "They're taking us out!" Mrs. Fox was wide awake in 1 second. She sat up, quivering all over.
Are you sure that's it?
I'm positive! Listen!
They'll kill my children!
Never!
But darling, they will. You know they will.
Scrunch, scrunch, scrunch went the shovels above their heads. Small stones and bits of earth began falling from the roof of the tunnel. How are you gonna kill us, Mummy? Asked one of the small foxes. His brown black eyes were huge with fright. Will there be dogs? He said. Mrs. Fox began to cry. She gathered her 4 children close to her and held them tight. Suddenly there was a especially loud crunch above their heads, and the sharp end of a tunnel came right through the ceiling. The sight of this awful thing seemed to have an electric effect upon Mr. Fox. He jumped out and shouted, I've got it! Come on! There's not a moment to lose! Why didn't I think of it before? Think of what, Dad? A fox can dig quicker than a man, shouted Mr. Fox, beginning to dig. Nobody in the world can dig as quick as a fox. The soil began to fly up fiercely behind Mr. Fox as he started to dig for dear life with his front feet. Mrs. Fox ran forward to help him, so did the 4 children. Go downwards! ordered Mr. Fox. We've got to go deep as we possibly can! The tunnel began to grow longer and longer. It sloped steeply downwards. Deeper and deeper below the surface of the ground it went. The mother and the father and all 4 of the children were digging together. Their front legs were moving so fast you couldn't see them, and gradually the scrunching and scraping of the shovels became fainter and fainter. After about an hour, Mr. Fox stopped digging. Hold it! He said. They all stopped. They turned and looked back at the long tunnel they had just dug. All was quiet. Phew, said Mr. Fox. I think we've done it. They'll never get as deep as this. Well done, everyone. They all sat down, panting for breath. And Mrs. Fox said to her children,
I should like you to know that if it wasn't for your father, we should all be dead by now. Your father is a fantastic fox.
Mr. Fox looked at his wife, and she smiled. He loved her more than ever when she said stuff like that. As the sun rose the next morning, Boggis and Bunce and Bean were still digging. They had dug a hole so deep you could have put a house in it. But they had not yet come to the end of the fox's tunnel. They were all very tired and cross. Dang it, blast, said Boggis. Whose one idea was this? Bean's idea, said Bunce. Boggis and Bunce both stared at Bean. Bean took another swig of cider, then put the flask back in his pocket without offering it to the others. Listen, he said angrily. I was that fox. I'm going to get that fox. I'm not giving in to a strong him up over my front porch, dead as a dumpling. We can't get it by digging, that's for sure, said the fat Boggis. I've had enough of digging. Bunce, the little pot-bellied dwarf, looked up at Bean and said, Have you got any more stupid ideas, then? What? Bean said, I can't hear you. Beans never took a bath. He never even washed. As a result, his ear holes were clogged with all kinds of muck and wax and bits of chewing gum and dead flies and stuff like that. This made him deaf. Speak louder, he said to Bunce, and Bunce shouted back, Got any more stupid ideas? Bean rubbed the back of his neck with a dirty finger. He had a boil coming here and he itched it. What we need on this job, he said, is machines. Mechanical shovels. We'll have them out in 5 minutes with mechanical shovels. This was a pretty good idea, and the other 2 had to admit it. You're right, Bean said, taking charge. Boggis, you stay here and see the fox doesn't escape. Bunce and I will go and fix our machinery. If he tries to get out, shoot him quick. The long, thin Bean walked away. The tiny Bunce trotted after him. The fat Boggis stayed where he was with his gun pointing at the foxhole. Soon, 2 enormous caterpillar tractors with mechanical shovels on their front ends came clattering into the wood. Bean was driving one, Bunce the other. The machines were both black. They were murderous, brutal-looking machines. Here we go then, shouted Bean. Death to the fox, shouted Bunce. The machines went to work, fighting huge mouthfuls of soil out on the hill. The big tree under which Mr. Fox had dug his hole in the first place was toppled like a matchstick. On all sides, rocks were sent flying and trees were falling, and the noise was deafening. Down in the tunnel, the foxes crouched, listening to the terrible clanging and banging overhead. What's happening, Dad? Cried the small foxes. What are they doing? Mr. Fox didn't know what was happening or what they were doing.
It's an earthquake!
Look! Said one of the small foxes. Our tunnel's got smaller. I can see daylight. They all looked round and said, yes. Yes, the mouth of the tunnel was only a few feet away from them now. In the circle of daylight beyond, they could see the two huge black tractors almost on top of them. Tractors! Shouted Mr. Fox. And mechanical shovels! Dig for your lives! Dig, 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 dig! Now there began a desperate race. Machines against the foxes. In the beginning, the hill After about an hour, as the machines bit away, more and more soil tipped away from the hilltop. Sometimes the foxes would gain a little ground and the crackling noises would grow fainter, and Mr. Fox would say, "We're gonna make it! I'm sure we are!" But then a few minutes later, the machines would come back at them and the crunch of the mighty shovels would get louder and louder. Once the foxes actually saw the sharp metal edge of one of those shovels as it scraped along the earth just behind them. "Keep going, my darlings!" panted Mr. Fox. "Don't give up! Keep going!" The fat dogger shouted to Bunce and Bean. "We'll get him at any moment! Have you caught sight of him yet?" "Not yet," shouted Bunce, "but I think you're close." "I'll pick him up with my bucket!" shouted Bunce. "I'll chop him to pieces!" By lunchtime, the machines were still at it, and so were the poor foxes. The farmers didn't stop for lunch. They were too keen to finish the job. "Hey there, Mr. Fox!" yelled Bunce, leaning out his tractor. "We're coming to get you now!" "You've had your last chicken!" yelled Buggers. "You'll never come pulled around my farm again!" A sort of madness had taken hold of the three men. The small, skinny Bean and dwarfish, pot-bellied Bunce were driving the machines like maniacs, racing the motors and making the shovels take a terrific speed. The fat Buggers was hopping about like a dervish and shouting, "Faster! Faster!" By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, this is what happened to the hill. My God! The hole the machines had dug was like the crater of a volcano. It was such an extraordinary sight that crowds of people came rushing out of the surrounding villages to have a look. They stood on the edge of the crater and stared down at Buggers and Bunce and Bean. "Hey there, Buggers! What's going on?" "We're after a fox!" "You must be mad!" The people cheered and laughed, but this only made the three farmers more furious and more obstinate and more determined than ever not to give up until they had caught the fox. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Bean switched off the motor of his tractor and climbed down from the driver's seat. Bunce did the same. Both men had had enough. They were tired and stiff from driving the tractors all day. They were also hungry. Slowly they walked over to the small fox's hole in the bottom of the huge crater. Bunce was cursing the fox with dirty words that cannot be said in this audio production. Buggers came waddling up. "Dang it, blast that filthy, stinking fox!" he said. "What the heck do we do now?" "I'll tell you what we don't do," Bean said. "We don't let him go. We'll never let him go!" Bunce declared. "Never, never, never, never!" cried Buggers. "Yeah, that Mr. Fox!" yelled Bean, bending low and shouting down the hole. "It's not over yet, Mr. Fox. We're not going over till we're strung up. You get us a dig bat!" Whereupon the three men all shook hands with one another and swore a solemn oath they would not go back to their farms until the fox was caught. "What's the next move?" asked Bunce, the pot-bellied dwarf. "We're sending you down the hole and fetch him up," said Bean. "And down you go, you miserable midget." "No, not me, no!" screamed Bunce, running away. Bean made a sickly smile. When he smiled, you saw his scarlet gums. You saw more gums than teeth. "There's only one thing to do," he said. "We'll shout him out. We'll camp here day and night, watching the hole. He'll come out in the end. He'll have to." So Buggers and Bunce and Bean sent messages down to their farms asking for tents, sleeping bags, and supper. That evening, 3 tents were put up in the crater of the hill, one for Buggers, one for Bunce, and one for Bean. The tents surrounded Mr. Fox's hole, and the 3 farmers sat outside their tents eating their supper. Buggers had 3 boiled chickens smothered in dumplings. Bunce had 6 donuts filled with disgusting goose liver paste, and Bean had 2 gallons of cider. All 3 of them kept their guns beside them. Buggers picked up a steaming chicken and held it close to the fox's hole. "Can you smell this, Mr. Fox?" he shouted. Lovely tender chicken, why don't you come up and get it?" The rich scent of chicken waved down the tunnel to where the foxes were crouching. said one of the small foxes. Couldn't we just sneak up and snatch it out of his hand?
Don't you dare. That's just what they want you to do.
But we're so hungry! They cried. How long will it be till we get something to eat? Their mother didn't answer them, nor did their father. There was no answer to give. As darkness fell, Bunsen Bean switched on the powerful headlamps of the two tractors and shung them onto the hull. Now, said Bean, we're just taking turn to keep watch. One watches while to sleep, and so on for all the night. Boggers said, the fox takes a hole right through the hill and comes out the other side. Didn't figure that one, did ya? Of course I did, said Bean, pretending he had. Right, then tell us the answer, said Boggers. Bean picked something small and black out of its ear and flicked it away. How many men have you got working on your farm? He said. 35, Boggers said. I've got 36, Bunce said. And I've got 37, Bean said. That makes 108 men altogether. We must all them six around the hill. Each man will have a gun and a flashlight. There'll be no escaping from Mr. Fox. So the order went down to the farms, and that night 108 men formed a tight ring around the bottom of the hill. They were armed with sticks and guns and hatchets and pistols and all sorts of other horrible weapons. This made it quite impossible for a fox, or indeed for any other animal, to escape from the hill. The next day, the watching and waiting went on. Boggers and Bunsen Beans sat up on small stools staring at the fox's hole. They didn't talk much, they just sat there with their guns on their laps. Every so often, Mr. Fox would creep a little closer towards the mouth of the tunnel and get a sniff. Then he would creep back again. He said, "They're still there."
Are you quite sure?
"Positive," said Mr. Fox. "I can smell that man being a mile away. He stinks." For 3 days and 3 nights this waiting game went on. "How long can a fox go without food or water?" Boggers asked on the 3rd day. "Not much longer now," Bean told them. "He'll make a run for it soon. He'll have to." Bean was right. Down in the tunnel, the foxes were slowly but surely starving to death. "If only we could have just had a tiny sip of water," said one of the foxes. "Oh, Dad, can't you do something? Can't we make a dash for it, Dad? We'll have a little bit of a chance, wouldn't we?"
No chance at all. I refuse to let you go up there and face those guns. I'd sooner you stay down here and die in peace.
Mr. Fox had not spoken for a long time. He had been sitting quite still, his eyes closed, not even hearing what the others were saying. Mrs. Fox knew that he was trying desperately to think of a way out, and now, as she looked at him, she saw something stir in him and get slowly to his feet. He looked back at his wife. There was a small spark of excitement dancing in his eyes.
What is it, darling?
"I've just had a bit of an idea," Mr. Fox said carefully. "What?" they cried. "Oh, Dad, what is it?"
Come on, tell us quickly.
"Well," Mr. Fox said, then stopped and sighed and sadly shook his head. He sat down again. "It's no use," he said. "It wouldn't work at all." "Why not, Dad?" "Because it means more digging and we aren't any of us strong enough for that of the 3 days and nights without food." "Yes, we are, Dad!" cried the small foxes, jumping around him and running to their father. "You can do it! You see if we can't, so can you!" Mr. Fox looked at the 4 small foxes and he smiled. "What fine children I have," he thought. "They were starving to death and they haven't had a drink for 3 days, but they're still undefeated. I must not let them down." I suppose we could give it a try," he said. "Let's go, Dad! Tell us what you want us to do!" Slowly, Mrs. Fox got on her feet. She was suffering more than any of them from the lack of food and water. She was very weak.
I am so sorry, but I don't think I'm going to be much help.
"You stay there where you are, my darling," said Mr. Fox. "We can handle this by ourselves." "This time, we must go in a very special direction," said Mr. Fox, pointing sidewards and downward. So he and his 4 children started to dig once again. The work went much more slowly now, yet they kept at it with great courage, and little by little, the tunnel began to grow. "Dad, I wish you'd tell us where we're going," said one of the children. "I dare not do that," said Mr. Fox, "because this place I am hoping to get to is so marvellous that if I've described it to you now, you would go crazy with excitement. And then, if we fail to get there, which is very possible, you would die of disappointment. I don't want to raise your hopes too much, my darlings." For a long, long time they kept on digging. how long, they did not know, because there were no days and no nights down there in the murky tunnel. But at last, Mr. Fox gave the order to stop. "I think," he said, "we'd better take a peep upstairs now and see where we are. I know where I want to be, but I can't possibly be sure we're anywhere near it." Slowly, wearily, the foxes began to slope the tunnel upwards to the surface. Up and up it went, until suddenly they came to something hard above their heads. They couldn't go up any further. Mr. Fox reached up to examine this hard thing. "It's wood!" he whispered. "Wood and planks! What does that mean, Dad?" "It means, unless I am very much mistaken, that we're going to build somebody's house," whispered Mr. Fox. "Be very quiet now, while I take a peek." Carefully, Mr. Fox began pushing up one of the floorboards. The boards creaked most terribly, and they all ducked down, waiting for something awful to happen. Nothing did, so Mr. Fox pushed up a second board, and then, very, very cautiously, he poked his head up through the gap. He let out a shriek of excitement. "I've done it!" he yelled. "I've done it! First time! I've done it! I've done it!" He pulled himself up through the gap in the floor and started prancing and dancing with joy. "Come on up!" he sang out. "Come up and see what we have here, my darlings! What a sight for a hungry fox! Hallelujah! Hooray! Hooray!" The four small foxes scrambled out of the tunnel, and what a fantastic sight it was now that they met their eyes. They were in a huge shed, and the whole place was steaming with chickens. There were white chickens, and brown chickens, and black chickens by the thousand. "Buggers' chicken house #1!" cried Mr. Fox. "It's exactly what I was aiming at. I hit slap in the middle. First time! Isn't that fantastic? And, if I may say so, rather clever!" The small foxes went wild of excitement. They started running around in all directions, chasing the stupid chickens. "Wait!" ordered Mr. Fox. "Don't lose your heads. Stand back! Come on, let's do this properly. First of all, everyone have a drink of water." They all ran over to the chicken's drinking trough and tapped up the lovely cool water. Then Mr. Fox chose 3 of the plumpiest hens, and with a clever flick of his jaws, he killed them instantly. "Back to the tunnel!" he ordered. "Come on! No fooling around! The quicker you move, the quicker you shall have something to eat!" One after another, they climbed down through the hole in the floor, and soon they were all standing once again in the dark tunnel. Mr. Fox reached up and pulled the floorboards back into place. He did this with great care. He did it so that no one could tell they had ever been moved. "My son," he said, giving the 3 plump hens to the biggest of his 4 small children, "run back with these to your mother. Tell her to prepare a feast. Tell her the rest of us will be along in a jiffy, as soon as we made a few other little arrangements." The small fox ran back along the tunnel as fast as he could, carrying the 3 plump hens. He was exploding with joy. "Just wait," he kept thinking. "Just wait until Mummy sees these." He had a long way to run, but he never stopped once on the way, and he came bursting in upon Mrs. Fox. "Mummy!" he cried, out of breath. "Mummy, look! Look, wake up and see what I got you!" Mrs. Fox, who was weaker than ever now from lack of food, opened one eye and looked at the hens.
I'm dreaming,
she murmured, and closed her eye again. "You're not dreaming, Mummy! They're real chickens! We're saved! We're not going to starve!" Mrs. Fox opened both eyes and sat up quickly.
but my dear child, where on earth?
"Buggers' chicken house #1!" spluttered the small fox. "We tunneled right up under the fox, and you never seen so many big fat hens in all your life! And Dad said to prepare a feast. They'll all be back soon." The sight of food seemed to give new strength to Mrs. Fox.
A feast it shall be. Oh, what a fantastic fox your father is. Hurry up, child, and start plucking those chickens.
Far away, down in the tunnel, the fantastic Mr. Fox was saying, "Now for the next bit, my darlings. This will be as easy as pie. All you have to do is dig another little tunnel from here to there, and To where, Dad? Don't ask so many questions. Start digging." Mr. Fox and the 3 remaining small foxes dug fast and straight. They were all too excited now to feel tired or hungry. They knew they were going to have a whacking great feast before long, and the fact that none other than Buggers' chickens they were going to eat made them gurgle and laughter every time they thought of it. It was lovely to realise that while the fat farmer was sitting up there on the hill waiting for them to starve, he was also giving them their dinner without knowing it. "Keep digging," said Mr. Fox. "It's not much farther now." All of a sudden, a deep voice above their heads said, "Who goes there?" The foxes jumped. They looked up quickly and they saw peeking through a small hole in the roof of the tunnel a long, black, spotted, furry face. "Badger!" cried Mr. Fox. "Foxy!" cried Mr. Badger. "My goodness me, I'm glad I found somebody at last. I've been digging around in circles for 3 days and nights, and I haven't the fucking idea where I am." Badger made the hole in the ceiling bigger and dropped down beside the foxes. A small badger, his son, dropped down after him. "Haven't you heard what's happening up in the hill?" Badger said excitedly. "It's chaos. Half the wood has disappeared, and there are men with guns all over the countryside. None of us can get out, even at night. We're all starving to death." "Who is we?" asked Mr. Fox. "All the Stiggers. It's me, and Mo, and Rabbit, and all our wives and children. Even Weasel, who can usually sneak out of the tighter spots, is right now hiding down the hall with Mrs. Fox and Smokey, 6 kids. Oh, God, what am I never gonna do, Foxy? I think we're finished." Mr. Fox looked at his 3 children and he smiled. The children smiled back at him, sharing his secret. "My dear old Badger," he said, "this maturing is all my fault." "I know it's your fault," said Badger fiercely, "and the farmers aren't going to give it until you gotcha. Unfortunately, that means us as well. It means everybody on the hill." Badger sat down and put a paw around his small son. "We're done for," he said softly. "My poor wife there is so weak she can't dig another yard." "Nor can mine," said Mr. Fox, "and yet at this very moment she is preparing for me and my children the most delicious feast of plump, juicy chickens." "Stop!" cried Badger. "Don't tease me, I can't stand it." "But it's true!" cried the small foxes. "That's not easy, we got chickens galore!" "And because everything is entirely my fault," said Mr. Fox, "I invite you to share the feast. I invite everyone to share it. You and Mo and Rabbit and Weasel and all your wives and children. There'll be plenty to go around, I can assure you." "You mean it?" cried Badger. "You really mean it?" Mr. Fox pushed his face close to Badger's and whispered darkly, "Do you know where we've just been?" "Where?" "Right inside Fox's chicken house number 1! "No!" "Yes! But there's nothing to where we are going now. You have just kept it right at the moment, my dear Badger. You can help us dig, and in the meantime, your small son can run back to Mrs. Badger and all the others and spread the good news." Mr. Fox turned to the small Badger and said, "Tell them they're invited to a fox's feast, then bring them all down here and follow this tunnel back till you find my home." "Yes, Mr. Fox," said the small Badger. "Yes, sir, right away, sir. Oh, thank you, sir." And he scampered quickly back through the hole into the roof of the tunnel and disappeared. "My dear Foxy," cried Badger, "what in the world has happened to your tail?" "Don't talk about it, please," said Mr. Fox. "It's a painful subject." They were digging a new tunnel. They dug on in silence. Badger was a great digger, and the tunnel went forward at a terrific pace now he was lending a paw. Soon they were crouching underneath yet another wooden floor. Mr. Fox grinned slyly, showing sharp white teeth. "If I'm not mistaken, my dear Badger," he said, "we are now underneath the farm which belonged to that nasty little pot-bellied dwarf Bunce. We are, in fact, directly underneath the most interesting parts of that farm." "Ducks and geese!" cried the small foxes, licking their lips. "Juicy, tender ducks and big fat geese!" "Exactly!" said Mr. Fox. "But how in the world can you know where they are?" asked Badger. Mr. Fox grinned again, showing even more white teeth. "Look," he said, "I know my way around these farms blindfold. For me it's just as easy below ground as it is above." He reached high and pushed up one wooden floorboard, then another. He poked his head through the gap. "Yes!" he shouted, jumping up from the room above. "I've done it again! I've hit it smack in the nose, right in the bullseye! Come and look!" Quickly, Badger and the 3 small foxes scrambled up after him. They stopped and stared. They stood and gaped. They were so overwhelmed they couldn't speak. For what they saw now was a kind of a fox's dream, a badger's dream, a paradise for hungry animals. "This, my dear old Badger," proclaimed Mr. Fox, "is Bunce's mighty storehouse. All his finest stuff is stored here before he sends it off to market." Against all the 4 walls of the great room, stacked in cupboards and piled above shelves reaching from floor to ceiling, were thousands and thousands of the finest, fattest ducks and geese, plucked and ready for roasting. And up above, gurgling from the rafters, there must have been at least 100 smoked hams, and 50 sides of bacon. Feast your eyes on that, cried Mr. Fox, dancing up and down. What do you think of that, eh? Pretty good grub. Suddenly, as though springs had been released in their legs, the three hungry small foxes and the ravenous hungry badger pranced forward to grab the delicious food. Stop! Ordered Mr. Fox. This is my party, so I shall decide the choosing. The others fell back, licking their chops. Mr. Fox began prowling around the storehouse, examining the glorious display with an expert eye. The thread of saliva slid down one side of his jaw, hung suspended in midair, then snapped. "We mustn't overdo it," he said. "Mustn't give the game away, mustn't let them know what we're up to. We must be neat and tidy and just take a few of the choicest smalls. So, to start off, we shall have 4 plump young pet ducks." He took them off the shelf. "Oh, how lovely and fat they are! No wonder Bunce gets a special price for them in the market. All right, Badger, lend me a hand to get them down. You children have as well. There we go. Goodness me, just how look your mouths are watering. Now, I think we'd better have a few geese. All 3 will be quite enough. We'll take the biggest. Oh my, you never see finer geese than these in a king's kitchen. Gently does it. That's the way. What about a couple of those nice smoked hams? I adore ham, don't you, Badger? Fetch me the snap ladder, would you please? Mr. Fox climbed up the ladder and handed down 3 magnificent hams. "And would you like bacon, Badger?" "I'm mad about bacon," cried Badger, dancing on excitement. "Let's have a side of bacon, that big one right up there." "And carrots, Dad," said the smallest of the 3 small foxes. "We must take some of the carrots." "Oh, don't be a twerp," said Mr. Fox. "You know we don't eat things like that." "Not for us, Dad. It's for the rabbits. Do you eat vegetables?" "My goodness me, you're right," cried Mr. Fox. "What a thoughtful little fellow you are. Take 10 bunches of carrots." Soon, all this lovely loot was laying in a neat heap above the floor. The small foxes crouched close, with their nose twitching, their eyes shining like stars. "And now," said Mr. Fox, "we shall have to borrow from our friend Bunce 2 of those useful push-carts over in the corner." He and Badger fetched the push-carts, and the ducks and geese and hams and bacon were all loaded onto them. Quickly, the push-carts were lowered through the hole into the floor. The animals slipped down after him. Back in the tunnel, Mr. Fox again pulled the floorboards very carefully into place so that no one could see they had been moved. "My darlings," he said, pointing to 2 of the 3 small foxes, "take a card each and run back as fast as you can to your mother. Give her my love and tell her we're having guests for dinner. The badgers, the moles, the rabbits and the weasels. Tell her we'll be having a truly great feast, and tell her the rest of us will be home as soon as we've done one more little job." "Yes, Dad! Right away, Dad!" they answered, and they grabbed a trolley each and went rushing off down the tunnel. "Just one more visit!" cried Mr. Fox. "And I bet I know where that'll be," said the small fox that was left now. He was the smallest fox of them all. "Where?" asked Badger. "Well," said the smallest fox, "we've been to Bogus and we've been to Bunch, but we haven't been to Bean. It must be Bean." "You are right," said Mr. Fox. "But what you don't know is which part of Bean's place we are about to visit." "Which?" they said both together. "Ah," said Mr. Fox, "just you wait and see." They were digging as they talked. The tunnel was going on forward fast. Suddenly, Badger said, "Doesn't this worry you just a tiny bit, Foxy?" "Worry me?" said Mr. Fox. "What?" "Oh, this stealing." Mr. Fox stopped digging and stared at Badger as though he had gone completely dotty. "My dear old furry frump," he said, "do you know anyone in the whole world who wouldn't swap a few chickens if his children were starving to death?" There was a short silence while Badger thought deeply about this. "You are far too respectable," said Mr. Fox. "There's nothing wrong with being respectable," Badger said. "Look," said Mr. Fox, "Bogus and Bunce and Bean are out to kill us. You realise that, I hope?" "I do, Foxy, I do indeed." "But we're not going to stoop to their level. We don't want to kill them." "I should hope not indeed," said Badger. "We wouldn't dream of it," said Mr. Fox. "We shall simply take a little food here and there to keep us and our families alive, right?" "I suppose we have to," said Badger. "If they want to be horrible, let them," said Mr. Fox. "We down here are decent, peace-loving people." Badger laid his head on one side and smiled at Mr. Fox. "Foxy," he said, "I love you." Thank you," said Mr. Fox. "Now, let's get on with this digging." 5 minutes later, Badger's front paws hit something against hard and flat. "What on earth is this?" he said. "It looks like a solid stone wall." He and Mr. Fox scrambled away the soil. It was a wall. It was in fact built of bricks, not stones. The wall was right in front of them, blocking their way. "Now who in the world would have built a wall out of the ground?" asked Badger. "Very simple," said Mr. Fox. "It's the wall of an underground room, and if I am not mistaken, it is exactly what I'm looking for." Mr. Fox examined the wall carefully. He saw that the cement between the bricks was old and crumbly, so he loosened the brick without much trouble and pulled it away. Suddenly, out from the hole where the brick had been, there popped a small, sharp face with whispers. "You away!" it snapped. "You can't come in here, it's private!" "Good Lord," said Badger, "it's Rat!" "You saucy beast," said Mr. Fox. "I should have guessed we'd find you down here somewhere." "Go away!" shrieked Rat. "Go on and beat it! This is my private hatch!" "Shut up!" said Mr. Fox. "I will not shut up!" shrieked Rat. "This is my place! I got here first!" Mr. Fox gave a brilliant smile, flashing his white teeth. "My dear Rat," he said softly, "I am a hungry fellow, and if you don't cook quickly, I shall eat you in one gulp." That did it. Rat popped back out fast out of sight. Mr. Fox laughed and began pulling more bricks out of the wall. When he had made the biggest hole, he crept through it. Badger and the smallest fox followed him inside. They found themselves in a vast, damp, gloomy cellar. "This is it!" cried Mr. Fox. "Is it what?" cried Badger. "This place is empty." "Where are the turkeys?" asked Mr. Smallest Fox, staring into the gloom. "I thought Buns was a turkey man." "He is a turkey man," said Mr. Fox, "but we're not after turkeys now. We've got plenty of food." "Then what do we need, Dad?" "Take a good look around," said Mr. Fox. "Don't you see anything that interests you?" Badger and the smallest fox peered into the half-darkness. As their eyes became assumed to the gloom, they began to see what they looked like a whole big bunch of glass jars standing above shelves upon the walls. They went closer. They were jars. There were hundreds of them. In each one of them was written the word cider. The smallest fox leaped high into the air. "Oh, Dad!" he cried out. "Look, it's what we found! It's cider!" "Exactly!" said Mr. Fox. "Tremendous!" shouted Badger. "Bean's secret cider cellar," said Mr. Fox. "But go carefully now, my dears. Don't make a noise. This cellar's right underneath the farmhouse itself." "Cider," said Badger. "It is especially good for badgers. We take it as medicine. 1 large glass 3 times a day with meals and never at bedtime." "You make the feast into a banquet," said Mr. Fox. While they were talking, the smallest fox had sneaked a jar off the shelf and had taken a gulp. "Wow!" he gave. You must understand, this was not the ordinary weak fizzy cider one buys in the store. This was the real stuff. A home-brewed fiery liquor that burned in your throat and boiled in your stomach. Gaped the smallest fox. "This is some cider." "That's quite enough of that," said Mr. Fox, grabbing the jar and putting it in his lips. He took an enormous gulp. "Oh, that's marvellous," he whispered, gaping for breath. "It's fantastic, it's beautiful." "It's my turn," said Badger, taking the jar and tilting his head well back. The cider gargled and bubbled down his throat. It's like melted gold," he gasped. "Oh, Foxy, it's like drinking sunbeams and winter rainbows." "You're poaching!" shrieked Rat. "Put that down at once! There'll be none left for me!" Rat was perched above the highest shelf in the cellar, peering out from behind the small jar. There was a small rubber tube inside the neck of the jar, and Rat was using this tube to suck out the cider. "You're drunk!" cried Mr. Fox. "Mind your business," shrieked Rat. "And if your great clumsy brutes come messing around in here, I'll be caught! Get out, and leave me to sip my cider in peace." At that moment, they heard a woman's voice calling up from the house above them. "Hurry up and get that cider, Mabel," the voice called. "You are what Mr. B doesn't like us to keep waiting, especially when he's been out all night in a tent." The animals froze. They stayed absolutely still. Their eyes pricked, their bodies tense. Then they heard the sound of a door being opened. The door was at the top of a flight of stone steps leading down from the house to the cellar, and now someone was starting to come down those steps. "Quick!" said Mr. Fox. "Hide!" He and Badger and the smallest fox jumped onto a shelf and crouched behind a row of big cider jars. Peering around the jars, they saw a huge woman come down into the cellar. At the foot of the steps, the woman paused, looking to left or right. Then she turned and headed straight for the place where Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox were hiding. She stopped right in front of them. The only thing between her and them was a row of cider jars. She was so close, Mr. Fox could hear the sound of her breathing. Peeping through the crack between two bottles, he noticed that she carried a big rolling pin in her one hand. "How many would you want this time, Mrs. Bean?" the woman shouted, and from the top of the steps, the other voice called back, "Bring up two of their jars!" "He drank about 4 yesterday, Mrs. Bean." "Yes, but he won't want that many today because he's not going to be here more than a few hours longer. He says the fox is about to make a run for it this morning. He can't possibly stand in that hole another day without food." The woman in the cellar reached out and lifted a jar of cider from the shelf. The jar she took was next but to one of the jar behind which Mr. Fox was crouching. "I'll be glad when the rotten roast cow is stood up on the front porch," she called back. "By the way, Mrs. Bean, your husband promised I could have the tail as a souvenir." "The tail's been all shot to pieces," said the voice from upstairs. "Did you know that?" "You mean it's ruined?" "Of course it's ruined. They shot the tail to Mr. Fox." "Oh, heck," said the big woman. "I did so want that tail." "You can have the head instead, Maple. You can get stuffed and hang on the bedroom wall. And hurry up with that cider." "Yes, Mom, I'm coming," said the big woman, and she took a second jar from the shelf. "If she takes one more, she'll see us," thought Mr. Fox. He could feel the smallest fox's body pressed tightly against his own, quivering with excitement. "Will that be enough, Mrs. B, or should I take 3 more?" "My goodness, Mabel! I don't care just so as long as you get the move on!" "The 2 it is," said the huge woman, speaking to herself now. "Oh, he drinks too much anyway." Carrying a jar in each hand and with the rolling pin tucked up on her arm, she walked away across the cellar. At the foot of the steps, she paused and looked around, sniffing the air. "There's rats down here, Mrs. Bean. I can smell them." "Then poison them, woman! Poison them! You know where the poison's kept!" "Yes, Mom," Mabel said. She climbed slowly out of sight up the steps. The door slammed. "Quick!" said Mr. Fox. "Grab a jar each and run with them!" Rat stood on his high shelf and shrieked, "What did I tell you? You nearly got lipped, didn't you? You nearly gave the key away! You keep out of here from now on! I don't want you around! This is my place to..." "You," said Mr. Fox, "are going to be poisoned." "Poppycock," said Rat. "I'll sit up here and watch her putting the stuff down. She'll never get me." Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox ran across the cellar, crouching a cotton jar each. "Goodbye, Rat," they called out as they disappeared through the hole in the wall. "Thanks to the lovely cider." "Thieves!" shrieked Rat. "Robbers! Bandits! Back in the tunnel, they paused so that Mr. Fox would break up the hole in the wall. He was humming to himself as he put the bricks back in place. "I can still taste that glorious cider," he said. "What an imprudent fellow Rat is." "He has bad manners," Badger said. "Oh, rats have bad manners. I have never met a polite rat yet." "And he drinks too much," said Mr. Fox, putting the last brick in place. "Ah, here we are. Now home to the feast." They grabbed their jars of cider and off they went. Mr. Fox was in front, the smaller fox came next, and Badger last. Along the tunnel they flew, past the turning that led to Bunter's mighty storehouse, past Boggers's chicken house, farm number 1, and then up the long home stretch towards the place where they knew Mrs. Fox would be waiting. "Keep it up, my darlings!" shouted Mr. Fox. "We'll soon be there. Think what's waiting for us at the other end, and just think what we're bringing home with us in these jars. That'll cheer up poor Mrs. Fox." Mr. Fox sang a little song as he rang. "Home again, swiftly I glide, back to my beautiful bride. She'll not feel so rotten as soon as she's gotten some cider and cider inside." Then Badger joined in. "Oh, poor Mrs. Badger," he cried, "so hungry she nearly died. But she'll not feel so hollow if only she swallows some cider inside. They were still singing as they rounded the final corner and burst in upon the most wonderful and amazing sight any of them had ever seen. The feast was just beginning. A large dining room had been hollowed out of the earth, and in the middle of it, seated around a huge table, were no less than 29 animals. They were Mrs. Fox and 3 small foxes, Mrs. Badger and 3 small badgers, Mole and Mrs. Mole and 4 small moles, Rabbit and Mrs. Rabbit and 5 small rabbits, Weasel and Mrs. Weasel and 6 small weasels. The table was covered with chickens and ducks and geese and hams and bacon, and everyone was tucking into the lovely food.
My darling,
Cried Mrs. Fox, jumping up and hugging Mr. Fox.
we couldn't wait. Please forgive us.
Then she hugged the smallest fox of all, and Mrs. Badger hugged Badger, and everyone hugged everyone else. Amongst shouts of joy, the great jars of cider were placed upon the table, and Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox sat down with the others. You must remember, no one had eaten a thing for several days. They were ravenous, so for a while there was no conversation at all. There was only the sound of crunching and chewing as the animals attacked the succulent food. At last, Badger stood up. He raised a glass of cider and called out, "A toast! I want you all to stand and drink a toast to our dear friend who has saved our lives this day, Mr. Fox." "To Mr. Fox!" they all shouted, standing up and raising their glasses. "To Mr. Fox! Long may he live!" Then Mrs. Fox got shyly to her feet and said,
Darling, I just want to say my husband is a fantastic fox.
Everyone clapped and cheered. Then Mr. Fox stood up himself. "This delicious meal," he began. Then he stopped. In the silence that followed, he let fly a tremendous belch. There was laughter and more clapping. "This delicious meal, my friends," he went on, "was by courtesy of Monsieur Bogus Bunsen Bean." More cheering and laughter. "And I hope that you have enjoyed this as much as I have." He let fly another colossal belch. "Spit it out and in," said Badger. "Thank you," said Mr. Fox, grinning hugely. "But now, my friends, let us be serious. Let us think of tomorrow and the next day and the days after that. If we go out, we will be killed, right?" "Right!" they shouted. "We'll be shot before we go to the yard," said Badger. "Exactly," said Mr. Fox. "But who wants to go out anyway? Let me ask you that. We're all diggers, every one of us. We hate the outside. The outside is full of enemies. We only go out because we have to get food for our families. But now, my friends, we have an entirely new setup. We have a safe tunnel leading to 3 of the finest stores in the world." "We do indeed," said Badger. "I have seen them." "And you know what this means," said Mr. Fox. "That means none of us need to go out in the open again!" There was a buzz of excitement around the table. "I therefore invite you all," Mr. Fox went on, "to stay here with me forever." "Forever!" they cried. "My goodness, how marvellous!" And Rabbit said to Mrs. Rabbit, "My dear, just think, we'll never have to be shut out alive in their lives." "We'll make," said Mr. Fox, "a little underground tunnel with streets and houses on each end, separate houses for badgers and moles and rabbits and foxes and weasels. And every day I shall go shopping for you all, and every day we will eat like kings." The cheering that followed this speech went on for many minutes. Outside the Fox's hole, Bogus and Bunsen Bean sat beside their tents with their guns on their laps. It was beginning to rain. Water was trickling down the necks of the 3 men and into their shoes. "He won't stay down there much longer now," Bogus said. "The brute must be famished," Bunsen said. "That's right," Bean said. "He'll be making a dash for it any moment. Keep your guns handy." They sat there by the hole, waiting for the fox to come out. And so far as I know, they are still waiting.